The Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It is Tuesday, January 13th, 2015. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son Joe Hagmann. Together we are the Hagmann Hagmann report. Doug Hagmann flying solo tonight. Joe is still out with some minor medical issues. He'll be back tomorrow. Rumor has it, however, he is in the background. What I'd like to know, ladies and gentlemen, we made some swapping out of some audio equipment. Those of you who are in the chat room, anybody there, can you tell me how this sounds? I'd like to be able to, measure the quality. Let's see here. Wow, things are going. It sounds great. Good. Okay, I got one. Everything's just flying by so quickly. Again, anyone in the chat room, I'd like to just get before we go any further, get an idea on how this sounds, this audio equipment here. Running it through some special filters and doing some different things. Can you tell me, anybody, just type in the chat, just roughly how this sounds, if you can hear it. Okay, 5x5, good enough. All right, I'll carry on then. Folks, you're listening to the only show where the news is presented. By the way, thank you for putting up with the patience, or thank you for your patience on putting up with that. Trying a couple of different things, and I suspect in the next couple of weeks we're going to have a great uplifting and nice announcement with respect to where our broadcast is headed. But folks, you're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. We'll look beyond the headlines, the bylines that bring you the news behind the news. We broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Our home base on the internet is hagmannandhagmann.com. That's hagmannandhagmann.com. I'm going to thank, I'm not going to do that on air, but he asked me not to. I just thank the individual for giving us the assist today with the audio equipment. We're also simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in at the Hagmann&Hagmann-Report.com. Thanks for joining us. Thank you so much for your belief and trust in us as we walk through this minefield of current events together. My goodness, last night, folks, it was a great show. I think everyone would agree, right? It was a fantastic show with Pastor David Langford and Steve Coyle. My word, it was a fabulous program. We got so many emails. Many of you are partaking in the January initiative, and of course the January 31st initiative. Please, if you have the opportunity, send Pastor Langford, it's just a little note, but via email. He didn't ask for this. I'm asking for this. Just to let him know you're on board with it, you're going to be participating, or you are participating in this. And of course on January 31st, the Saturday, we will be in full prayer, repentance, and fasting mode that day. And, if you're not physically able to do the fasting, I fully understand. But I'm sure he would appreciate, regardless of where you are listening to this around the world, just a notation that you're behind them, or you're involved with the initiative. And I'm sure he'll be praying for you as well. Folks, nothing is as it appears to be. I want to tell you that flat out, and I just have so much information. It's difficult really to really start anywhere and make it coherent, make this coherent. I happen to tune into the various talk shows today, listening to the various, from Glenn Beck to Rush Limbaugh to others, many others. And it just seems like everyone's dancing around the obvious, which is troublesome to me. When I say dancing around the obvious, I mean getting into the real, what's really going on behind the news, and that's what we do, of course. That's why we're here. At least that's what that's what I like to think. Why we're here. Prior to the Paris attacks, what exactly was going on in the world? Of course, the UK political pedophile ring scandal. That and the outreach of that scandal to America. The full scope of that political pedophile ring, the elitists that really seem to be focused primarily within the UK. It can't be fully appreciated without looking here in America. If you go back, and I want to touch on this before I go into current events, if you go back into July of 2014, July of last year, we saw that numerous high-ranking British politicians, well, they were being investigated for their involvement in an extensive pedophile ring. But once again, you can't really look at it merely from the UK or merely isolated to the United Kingdom, Great Britain. You know, we've often said, and others have said, that there is in existence a massive pedophilia ring involving officials in the highest levels of government. And we were called conspiracy nuts and kooks and fringe topic people. Well, we saw that that's no longer the case. Conspiracy theory is not a theory any longer. And the cover-up obviously isn't going very well. Didn't work out too well. It's interesting because there was back in and I don't know how many people are familiar with this. There back in the 1980s, and I know this is going back quite far. There were a lot of allegations of organized child sex abuse cases at Westminster in the 1980s. And there was a call for full public inquiry, and you had former conservative cabinet ministers and others demanding that that people look into what was going on within the royal family, within the government, within the Home Office. Well, the Home Office, or the British Parliament, said that more than 100 files relating to child abuse over a period of 20 years had gone missing. This is back now. We're going back early to mid-2014. This is huge, and I mean very huge. This is the reason this is so big, obviously, is because of the blackmail, and this goes beyond pedophilia. If you can really understand the scope of this, this is beyond pedophilia. This is a ritualistic, satanic kind of operation. Back in the mid-2014, there were at least 40 British MPs implicated in this pedophilia ring. But again, tip of the iceberg. Folks, what we're doing is looking at what was in the news right before Paris. And we'll get to Paris here in a moment. Talking about pedophilia rings, talking about satanic pedophilia rings, talking about satanic sex rings. Let me tell you, that's pretty edgy stuff, right? I think everyone would agree. Pretty edgy stuff. But it seems to be in the midst or in the middle of many, many things that are taking place within the world today, within the governments, within the elite ruling class of people. Now, this has a purpose, of course. It involves trauma-based mind control. It involves deviant behavior. It's just incredible. But if we go back, and I just want to touch on this again, looking at what was on the map before Paris. Perhaps this scandal initially centered around the rape and child abuse accusations against that very well-connected BBC presenter and knight, Jimmy Savile. He died in 2011. That kind of opened up an entirely, opened up the Pandora's box of pedophilia. This organized pedophilia ring, which allegedly was operated in part out of the BBC, at least in that respect, at least in Jimmy Savile's part. The organized pedophilia ring apparently and allegedly involved at least 40 British MPs, and another aspect involves a very close friend of Jimmy Savile, former British Prime Minister Cyril Smith. He's a knight. Police claim to have overwhelming evidence that Cyril physically abused young boys in the 1960s. Now, again, you have to ask yourself, well, why are we rehashing this all going back to the 1960s? Well, the reason is, I've got to tell you, the reason is what happened in the 60s and 70s and 80s and all through the present really laid the foundation and has laid the foundation for what's taking place today. Don't look at this as a scandal. Don't look at this as a one-off or some sort of just a deviant, morally bankrupt sexual behavior. No, this is much more involved than that. This is at the heart of the satanic, and people aren't covering this at all. Or once they do cover this, the Paris attacks or rip this from the headlines, people forget about this. Well, here we are in 2015 now. The abuse, the sexual aspects, the sex things that are going on with respect to the pedophilia ring have taken deep root both in the UK and in the Middle East and in America. And this transcends all political parties. It transcends multiple presidential administrations. And it transcends and involves numerous media outlets. We've got a bunch of predators in high positions, both in politics and in media, who are using these using this as a as a tool, if you will, as a means, as a method. It's amazing. Sorry about that. I was distracted here. As you know, folks, in case you're joining us late, Doug Hagmann here, flying solo tonight while Joe recovers. He'll be back tomorrow, and we do appreciate and thank you for your prayers. Now, what I'd like everyone to do is really understand the weight, the importance of these sexual assaults, this sexual pedophilia ring, and think of blackmail in terms of these pedophilia rings. Think of extracting money from the people that have the goods on the political officials, the senators, or an MP, or even the president, perhaps. If you have the political elite, the media, the intelligence agencies in particular under your thumb, underfoot, under your boot, anything is possible. This is how puppets are created that are willing to start wars. This is how puppets are created that are willing to destroy the dollar. This is how puppets are created that are willing to censor the news. This is how puppets are created that are willing and able to change laws. This is how puppets are created that are able to take congressmen, senators, and make them vote the way they want. This is a huge, widespread problem. We've got satanic pedophilia rings operating here in America as well as the UK, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in all Middle Eastern I'm going to say all Middle Eastern countries, in most Western countries, and in the Vatican. I'm an equal opportunity accuser here. We have state-sponsored child rape worldwide, and this is satanic in nature. To believe that we can actually address this or change this, I mean, no one would be left in power to pull the covers, pull the veil back from what's taking place and what has taken place. You know, I often wondered how Obama, for example, how Obama could rise, this meteoric rise from community organizer to the president. Obviously, yes, the CIA, obviously, yes. But there's something more. There's definitely something more, obviously. And why, operating on a platform of hope and change, to come into the selected as president and to occupy the Oval Office, the renegade in chief, how he could just abandon totally the hope and change factor and have everyone go along with him, the media in particular. How is this possible? What's taking place? The answer is, in fact, the satanic pedophilia ring. In part, anyway. That's how pervasive, that's how strong this is. And you have to look at Obama, you know, and wonder, is he even his own man, given the trauma-based mind control, the CIA type of operations to which he was subjected, and he was put into power, groomed, created. We are living under Obama's America right now, at least in part. This is, I would say, it's Obama and Bush, their America. But we have to know, folks, to extend beyond and inclusive of the pedophilia ring, Obama was groomed to occupy the Oval Office by key members of the Trilateral Commission. We've got to note, and again, I'm extending beyond now away from the pedophilia ring, but keeping that as a footnote or perhaps as a page marker. Notably, it was Zygmunt Brzezinski, the co-founder of the Trilateral Commission with David Rockefeller back in 1973, who was Obama's principal foreign policy advisor. They groomed Obama to occupy the Oval Office. Two key people, Zygmunt Brzezinski and David Rockefeller, 1973. Well, he founded the Trilateral Commission with Brzezinski. Much of the pre-election attention to Obama, you've got to remember, or at least compare to Brzezinski's tutoring of Carter prior to the 1976 presidential election. And anyone who would doubt the Commission's continuing influence on Obama, you've got to consider his previous appointments. No less than 11 of the Trilateral Commission. About a dozen or so people from the Trilateral Commission Obama had appointed right after his selection and installation. You've got Geithner, you've got Rice, the ambassador to the United Nations, National Security Advisor, former General James Jones. You got the Thomas Donilon. You've got Paul Volcker. All these people at the right and left hand of Obama. Admiral Dennis C. Blair, Kurt M. Campbell, James Steinberg, Richard Hawes, Dennis Ross, Richard Holbrooke. There are many other seemingly incidental links I could go on to the Trilateral Commission. Look, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is married to a commission member, Bill Clinton, former president, William Jefferson Clinton. Geithner, look at his informal group of advisors. at the time. Now I'm speaking contemporaneous to their positions. You had Lehman Brothers front man Corrigan, E. Gerald Corrigan, that is. You have Paul Volcker, former chairman of the Fed. He was succeeded, of course, by Alan Greenspan, and then Peterson. And there are others. Now, his first job after college was with Henry Kissinger at Kissinger Associates. Brent Scowcroft, by the way, was a carryover from the Clinton administration. He was an unofficial advisor to Obama, and he was a mentor to Gates, defense secretary, former. Remember Bob Zelnick? Zellick? World Bank, Lawrence Summers, the White House economic advisor, former. He was mentored by former Treasury Secretary Robert Ruman during the Clinton administration. These people are all intertwined. There are so many such links, but you get the idea, don't you? If you look very closely if you go back and dissect the initial nominees and appointees, we can see that 5 of the Trilateral Commission appointees involved the State Department. And this is where foreign policy is created and implemented, notably Hillary Clinton. You've got a figure. She's part and parcel with the origins, the objectives, policies. Because of Bill Clinton, is there anything more important now, today, than economic recovery with the state of our economy, moving away from the State Department? I would say no. No, because what is in play right now is an attempt to kill the U.S. dollar. And when we look at it, who is actually controlling? Who are the controllers behind the policies and practical procedures with respect to the killing of the U.S. dollar? All lines link to the Trilateral Commission and the CFR, but specifically the Trilateral Commission. All lines lead back to the power elite, the globalists, the people that no one want to really identify and talk about. Right and left of the political spectrum. Now, moving away from the economy, let's look at the geopolitical aspects of things. The State Department, if you go back pre-Benghazi, pre-Arab Spring, who set policy? How did we get to where we're at right now? Don't worry, folks. This is all leading up to Paris. But if you looked at the State Department in 2009, 2010, 2011, and the progression from the 2009 time period, you would see Kurt Campbell, James Steinberg, Richard Hawes, Dennis Ross. Ross, by the way, was a spokesman for Israel. Richard Holbrooke, the butcher of Serbia, shall we say. Susan Rice, ambassador to the United Nations. Headquarters reside, in a structure erected in New York on land donated by David Rockefeller. You've heard Steve Quayle talk about this. Rice had no experience for the job she was awarded. And the UN, folks, is the chosen instrument for ushering in the ultimate one-world government. It places itself above the U.S. Constitution, in defiance of the U.S. Constitution, in defiance of our national sovereignty. Rice has and continues in ways to help to subvert the U.S. into vassal states under the umbrella of the UN. John Coleman did extensive studies on this topic. He wrote a book titled Obama's America. If you look back at the Trilateral Commission, Since 1973, it's met regularly in sessions to discuss policy position papers developed by its members, and these policies are debated in order to achieve a particular consensus. Respective members return to their own countries. They in turn implement policies consistent with that consensus. The original stated purpose of the Trilateral Commission was to create a new international economic order. In its current statement, says it's fostering this closer cooperation among the democratic industrialized areas of the world, shared with leadership responsibilities in the wider international system. So this is a globalist. Yes, it's a globalist organization. It has globalist objectives, and of course, the purpose of this is to create this single global governance. Now, much, shall I say, through complacency and fear-mongering, most Americans have become very, very reticent when it comes to talking about things like this. You don't see people, Americans, taking to the street in mass demonstrations like you see in France and Britain, about, for example, about economic issues, about the Fed. When's the last time we saw anything? We saw something close back a number of years ago with the summit. But marching in the streets is hardly ever considered by Americans. It's often called unpatriotic, regardless of whether you're red or blue, right? Anyone who protests in the public is really labeled now a potential terrorist, and they're targeted by the FBI. Meanwhile, most Americans, we remain caught up in our fantasies that the U.S. is the world's only superpower. This while white-collar bandits in Washington, D.C. and Wall Street are making off with everything in their gym bags, briefcases, and purses. If we look back and again, we're looking at this from a view from our atmosphere, looking at the entire situation here. The creation of $1 trillion in money out of thin air by the Fed weakened the U.S. dollar. It made the U.S. dollar the weakest currency in the world. If you recall, the leaders of the G20 nations, they decided to ditch the dollar and shift to other world reserve currencies. China blatantly, publicly asking the U.S. to put up some kind of collateral. Look at what they're doing. Look at what they've done. Waldorf Astoria, Chinese-owned. J.P. Morgan Chase headquarters, Chinese-owned. Well, the entirety, it seems, or the large part of the United States is collateral for Chinese debt, and the U.S. really just prints more money. $165 million in bonus money was paid to AIG. Do you recall this? Some time ago. They're killing the dollar. By the time we see the dust settle, folks, the dollar is going to be worth nothing. It's going to have lost about 99% of its value, of its purchasing powers. And, of course, this numbers the days of America. The days of America are numbered. The repetitive creation of the money that we see, the money supply, new money by the Fed, is the last and final straw. It's really the final looting of the U.S. economy by the wealthy elite, by the globalists. The ship of state that we call America, it's sinking. And the power elite, they've monopolized the life rafts, folks. I'd like to say I'd kind of grab your hand and walk you slowly and carefully to the lifeboats, but they're occupied. Maybe we should toss those elite out of the life rafts and let them go down with the ship and save ourselves. And I think that in some ways that's what we're doing here. You're going to see and I believe, and I know Pastor Langford and Steve Quayle talked about this yesterday. I think that from now until really we really have to watch September, October timeframe with respect to the U.S. dollar. And yesterday, Pastor Langford said it would be a cascading. He felt it would be a cascading series of events that would take place that would lead to, well, multiple crises that would lead to utter chaos here in the United States. And he said, look, I don't know if it's going to happen in September or October, but it's going to happen. You recall what he said? And I think we have to understand that. We have to understand that that's what we have to operate off of that timeline, I believe. Now, folks, I mentioned 3 really separate things here in the first part of the program. I'm going to come back and tie this all together. I'm going to come back and tie all of this together. I'm going to take a short break. For your patience as we took care of some audio tweaks here and there. Hopefully the audio still sounds good. I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen in the chat room, for answering me about the audio. It appears that we do have some fixes implemented that will be carrying us through. We're also working on some file sizes to downgrade the file, or to minimize the file sizes for those people with issues with regard to the files. So with the MP3 files, and we're working on a number of other issues. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, next week, perhaps, or the following week, we're going to have a very, very special announcement that I hope everyone will be attuned to. Perhaps around the end of January. That announcement will change a lot of things. Guarantee it. Getting back to what I was referring to, I started off talking about talking about the pedophilia, the news headlines right before the Paris attacks. What was in the news before the Paris attacks? So I started talking about the pedophilia ring with the royals in Britain and how it extended here in the United States. Then I wandered off, didn't I, into the Trilateral Commission and Obama being selected and placed in the Oval Office, and more about the Trilateral Commission, and then the State Department, of course, and the economy. Did I have a stroke? You see, all of these things were hot and heavy prior to Paris. All of these things, the news, the headlines, if you looked at Drudge, if you looked at other premier sites with the news, all of these things were bubbling up to the surface. Now, not so with respect to the Trilateral Commission, you'd had to read into the various issues, and then drill down to find the people, but it all traced back to the Trilateral Commission. And then with respect to the economy, of course, we've known the economy was and is on a dying course. Now, let me tie everything together here for you. Obama, and now seemingly there are going to be a number of issues I'm going to raise here over the next couple of minutes that are going to be seemingly disparate. And folks, by the way, we're going to have Stan coming on at the top of the next hour. Maybe he can weigh in on the Paris attacks and other things. But a few things that are seemingly unrelated to anything, or unrelated here in this conversation, kind of like a scattered thought mind process here. They're not. They're all related. The headlines today: Obama no-show in Paris. Not only was Obama a no-show, but no one from our executive branch showed up. Holder was over there for a meeting. Instead, they're going to have a security summit, a social experiment here in the White House next month. That's their response. But Obama wasn't there. There's a huge, huge outcry over that among the people on the conservative right. And I get that. I understand that. We talked about that last night a little bit. The most obvious explanation is he's a Muslim, or at least admittedly so. He would side with Islam, of course, when the ill winds blow, and that's what we have seen, both in practice and in spirit, have we not? And we've seen the Muslim Brotherhood infiltration into the current administration. And of course, Andre Carson, folks, if you haven't heard this, again, perhaps overshadowed by the Paris attacks. Andre Carson, the congressman, just appointed to the House Intelligence Committee by Nancy Pelosi. Andre Carson. This is important, folks. You've now got a full-blown Muslim making policy with access to the highest levels of intelligence now in the House Intelligence Committee, put there by Nancy Pelosi. That's Andre Carson. So, what are Republicans saying? They're not saying anything. Why? Why isn't there any Republican or conservative backlash to Andre Carson? For the same reason, John Boehner remains the most powerful man in Congress. For the very same reasons that I started out the show with. Ladies and gentlemen, it really pains me to say this, and I've really gone through a lot of research and investigation over the last couple of months into this. Those headlines about the pedophilia, the sex trafficking, all of that was over in the Atlantic, or over in Great Britain across the Atlantic, reach into the highest levels of our government here. I hope you can understand the ramifications of this, and I'm sure you can. But this is pure evil in its most basic form. This is not incompetence. This is not moronic. These appointments, for example, the appointment of Andre Carson to that position is not by accident. It's not to satisfy some sort of demographic. It's not because he's black. It's not because he's a Democrat. It's not because he's a Muslim. Well, it is that anyway. But, and I should add that he does serve on the House Armed Services Committee, worked for the Department of Homeland Security's Fusion Center. That is a clearinghouse established by the federal government to streamline data sharing between the various departments, just so you know what a fusion center is. But see, all of this, these are all interconnected. The fact that Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi announced this appointment in a closed-door meeting today, she would name the first Muslim lawmaker to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. This does not happen by accident. This was not done to share the demographics or to appeal to the demographics. This is the same part and parcel to Obama being selected and placed in the Oval Office. You've just witnessed today, and over the last 6 years, 7 years, the exponential throttling down to taking America down. Let me throw something else out at you here. And folks, I don't know if you've seen this or not. This is something I was going to put up, and I can't remember if I talked about this last week. I've gotten a couple of emails on this, and folks, if you haven't seen this, please search this. I probably will be talking about this, and we're going to get Nathan Leal on with Steve Quayle together, hopefully, to talk about this. Did you happen to see The Economist, the cover of The Economist magazine? It was reported in numerous venues on the internet, including The Vigilant Citizen. But the magazine The Economist published an issue named The World in 2015. On the cover are some pretty odd and really eerie images. First, a mushroom cloud. The second, the Federal Reserve in a game called Panic. If you want to know what to expect in 2015, 2016, but in particular 2015, take a look at the cover of The Economist. It's directly related to the world elite. It's The Economist magazine, that is. It's partly owned by the Rothschild banking family of England, and its editor-in-chief attended the Bilderberg conference on a number of occasions. The Economist, the people behind The Economist, they know things that most people don't, and it is because of that the 2015 prediction cover is rather unsettling. It's bleak and sinister. It features political figures, fictional characters, pop culture icons. They'll make the news in 2015, all of them. It also includes several drawings that are extremely symbolic and allude to important elements of the global elite. Take a look. Just search for The Economist, The World in 2015. If you think this is old news, perhaps it is, perhaps you've seen it, perhaps you've dissected it, perhaps you've shared it with others. Others have not seen it. When you first look at it, you'll see Obama and Putin. You'll see references to the rugby cup and the new Spider-Man movie at the time. But take a real close look. There's a two-faced globe. One side of the globe, well, it faces stoically toward the west, while the other side appears angry. Could this represent perhaps a confrontation between the East and the West? And what would propel that confrontation? View Paris, France. The 40-plus political leaders, world leaders, marching in lockstep to the tune of the Islamic terrorism events that took place, saying, we're not going to put up with this. Think about that image, as well as thinking about Netanyahu being in there with Abbas, seeing not only the various signs being held up in the background for the publication and the victims that died, that were executed, but the various state flags, including the Palestinian flags behind Abbas. So when I talk about this Economist magazine that was done in 2014, published in 2015, consider what you saw in Paris, not just the march, but also the attacks, the Hegelian dialectic aspect of it, through the prism of this Economist magazine. Again, the two-faced globe, and then you've got the color of the people, the luminaries and others on the cover. If you look at the faces of the personalities on the cover, some you'll find in full color, others you'll find in black and white. Now, why and who, and is that significant? Among the people in black and white, you've got Vladimir Putin, you've got Merkel, Obama, Clinton, and David Cameron. If you look at those in color, well, this is an interesting and eclectic group. You've got magician David Blaine. You've got a younger person holding a Singapore banner, and we should note that Singapore is the host of the 2015 SEA Games. And then some unidentified guy wearing what would be termed as virtual reality equipment. If you look at this compilation. Could it be, and I'll just ask this, could it be that those pictured in black and white appear to be part of the global power elite? There's also a member of ISIS in that as well. And then those in color. Could they be the outsiders outside of the Rothschild banking family? As the outsiders, because the Rothschild banking family, as I said, own parts of The Economist? Is this how they perceive the world? Remember, I said it's not really important what we believe. It's what's important is what they believe, and belief is the driver of action. So is this how the global power brokers perceive the world? And if you look closely at that picture, is that Napoleon in the back left holding up a white high five just in front of the Chinese Confucius character? Folks, pull up an image of this. After the show, I will put up the picture that I'm referring to. I'm trying to find the highest quality resolution image I can, because it's worthy of inspection and research. It's extremely worthy of it. Because we know, don't we, that this is how the Illuminati, the people who run the world, this is their hobby. They communicate in numbers. They communicate with numbers. They love to provide some symbols and maybe even tease us a tad. Hey, we told you. We have to tell you what's going to take place. So we're telling you through symbols and pictures, and we're conveying it through entertainment. And entertainment, that's the new news today. That's where you can find the news, is the entertainment. Entertainment has become the source of news. News is now the entertainment. Now, you've got the Pied Piper on this 2015 themed cover. Now, that's pretty unsettling when you consider the Pied Piper is a German legendary character about the story's about a man who used his magical flute to lure away the children, never to be seen again. Didn't I say something about pedophilia at the beginning of the program? Just saying. Now, you'll find analyses of this Economist magazine. The folkloric figure dating from the Middle Ages is said to represent either massive death by plague or catastrophe, or a movement of massive immigration. It also perfectly represents today's youth being lured and mystified by the music of mass media. And conveniently, there's a small boy right underneath the Pied Piper's flute. Now, I would add to that assessment that can be found, I believe, at the various internet sites. I think one is the Burning Platform, but anyway, I would assert that the Pied Piper figure here is talking about something a little bit different, given the headlines prior to the Paris attacks. And you've got the boy underneath the Pied Piper I just mentioned. He's got a kind of a strange look on his face. He's watching a game called Panic. And then you've got the words Federal Reserve in Chi, or Qi, C-H-I. Some say that stands for China, but I'm not so sure. That on top, the words green light and SIS, some say that stands for ISIS or crisis. Again, I've got a different take on that, or at the bottom. The little boy watches as this twisted game of Plinko, Panic, that is, unfolds the same way. The clueless masses watch powerlessly while various events unfold on mass media. You know, as the name of the game does state the ultimate goal is to cause panic around the world and, well, the crises. They're almost randomly generated by those who control the game on the magazine cover owned by the Rothschilds nonetheless. Now, are we not seeing, or could we not have seen, perhaps, the collateral or the Paris attacks among the greater Clash of Civilizations issue recorded on this magazine? Could be. There is in front of Putin in this magazine, there's a small aircraft on which is written crop o' dust, like big old bag of money. No, crop o' dust. This refers to, some say, the concept of crop dusting. And right under the helicopter is a child eating something. Now, consider, of course, the crop dusting and then the child eating something. That can be a little bit unsettling. A panda bear wearing a China flag Speedo. Yeah, you got to see that. While flexing its muscles. Could this be a very clever way of portraying the fact that China is gaining power, that they are wrestlers? Could that be like a wrestling outfit? I don't know. But there's a ghost there. Now, emerging from behind Obama's leg is a ghost reading a magazine with the word holiday on the front. Could this mean vacation? The magazine, that is. Why is that ghost? Which, if you think about this, when we talk about, well, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, and the demons, disembodied spirits of the Rephaim, we could say that ghost, which represents the dead Rephaim, product of the Nephilim, the Rephaim being a hybrid. Could it be that ghost might be planning to get away to somewhere? No. What does that mean, folks? Especially in proximity to Obama, and Obama known very well for his holidays. See, I've got a different take on all of this. I've got a much different take on The Economist, the cover. Folks, it's important. I think it's important for us to look at this and understand this, as it will be important for us to look at the events or the halftime show in the Super Bowl this year. I think what we're going to see, and also the Super Bowl halftime show last year, we need to pull all of these data points together. Even going back to the 2012 Olympics ceremonies. Because I think 2012 opened a door, the spiritual aspect of things. I'm talking about the occult. I'm talking about the Apollyon rising 2012. In 2012, I think things changed. So if we use 2012 as a marker in time, and from that point look at the 2012 ceremonies of the Olympics in London, or in the UK, that is, and every point, every show, performance of note, of significance from that point forward, I do believe will create a roadmap, a connect-a-dot type of picture into the plans of the Illuminati. And I think this Economist cover, having looked at this and looked at this and looked at this and studied this, yeah, I believe that this is now the latest message, or the vehicle in which the plans, the blueprints for the implementation of the New World Order can be found. I'll be putting this up. I'll be putting this up after the show. My entire research will not be up there on Hagmann and Hagmann.com, but the cover nonetheless will. I would recommend, like I said, folks, everyone take a look at it. Everyone take a look at the cover and come to your own conclusions. I will put my analysis up within a day or two. But you see, take a look at everything from that cover, well, to what happened in Paris. Not just the terrorist attacks, but the response to the terrorist attacks perhaps is more symbolic. And look what the Paris attacks covered. I think it's important for people to understand. Folks, we're going to be right back with Stan Deyo. I think my audio just went out there for a second. We're right back with Stan Deyo. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know in the chat room. Thank you. We've got audio. I know it's not as clear as it was before. Now, let me see what I can do here. Hang on just one second to bring Stan Deyo on. Stan Deyo from standeyo.com. Hold on one moment. Let me see if I can bring him on. Stan, are you there? Okay, let's see here. Okay. We're going to figure this out, ladies and gentlemen. Stan, I apologize for my inability to get this rolling here. Let me see if I can bring this guy on here. Bring Mr. Deyo on. Okay, I can't do it that way. You like live radio? It's rather embarrassing, I got to tell you. All right, he can't hear anything. I can't hear anything. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this. I really do. I apologize for this. I thought I upgraded some audio equipment. I did upgrade some audio. I thought the first hour audio was pretty good, and now I've locked myself out of the connectivity to Skype. So, to Christians United, if you can hear this, is there any way that you could possibly act on our behalf to get Mr. Deyo on? I don't know how you would do that. Is there anything I need to do? How can I do this? So it's a SOS to Christians United Broadcasting Network. Always like this on live radio. It's rather embarrassing, but it just goes to show you that, hey, you know what? We are not, we're certainly not the professionals that we never claimed to be. All right, let's see what we can do here. Let's see if we can get Stan on. I'm working two interfaces. Troy, for listening, I'm working two interfaces. I've got the Skype interface dialed in. I got the host locked in, and I've got Stan just hanging somewhere in the ether. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me see. I'm going to just send Stan a message here. Let's see here. Yeah. I apologize to Mr. Deyo for wasting his precious time, and for you, ladies and gentlemen, for having to put up with this matter. I'm very apologetic to this, about this. All right. In the meantime, while I've got somebody working on this right now as we speak, so I want to thank you for doing that. In the meantime, folks, I just want to continue with this. I know. Thank you for the emails. I know that we had dead air, no sound. Appreciate that. Now sound is back. Let me just double check here. Yeah, Marion, there is sound now. Okay, gotcha. Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much. Okay, had you? Okay, apparently the sound's out, folks. Can you hear me again? I mean, I one last time here before I just shut this entire operation down. Can you? Okay, thank you, thank you very much on the chat. Okay, all right. All right, folks. I'm not sure if I can actually connect hardwire or actually connect Stan to this. I have no clue as to what I can possibly do to get Stan on tonight. Okay, I'm just getting messages here. Stan, if you can hear this, I'm going to try to send you a message. If you can hear this, I cannot physically, I don't have the capability of bringing you on apparently. And I don't know what I did, why, or anything, but when they changed the audio, they locked me out of the ability to bring you on. And I don't have Joe here, and of course you can see the importance of Joe to this, and I certainly apologize. So having said that, my apologies. The only alternative would be, that I can see would be, is if you would call in, and I would bring you on air that way. Call in via landline. That could work. And if you do that, just Skype me a message, and I will then plug you right in. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your kindness, for your words of encouragement. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for your words of encouragement. I'm so sorry. I really am. I screwed this up in a royal way, apparently. Let's continue, if I can, with The Economist. You know, I find it interesting too, and folks, I run into this a lot. I've gotten a number of emails about this from different people, that Joe and I are, you know, we don't speak about Mossad, for example. That we don't talk about Israel when it comes to the New World Order. We don't talk about Israel, about their complicity in 9/11. We don't talk about Israel, or the Mossad, more appropriately, in 9/11. We don't talk about Mossad, their complicity in other terrorist attacks and events. That's what we get. As if we're running from this. No, look, just understand this. Anytime that you bring up Israel, God's people, the Jews, or if you mention the Mossad, for example, you will have people latch on to the fact that you are being anti-Semitic, you are being anti-Israel. This is no more anti-Israel than being anti-American when you talk about the corruption in the American government. Hang on just a second. I think I hear something. And communicating here on the channel. Let's see here. Okay, can you hear me, folks? All right. Thank you, lady. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right. Yeah, I don't have any hair. I don't have any hair left. I just pulled it all out by the follicles. There's blood on the studio walls. I have to say, I kicked a few things. Yes, I did. All right. Stan, I thank you so much for carrying the load at Christians United Broadcasting Network there. Thank you so much, Christians United Broadcasting Network. Thank you. All right, folks, believe it or not, we're going to take a top-of-the-hour break. Now that we've reestablished contact, really just brief. It's going to be brief. Just stand by. I'm not going to push any buttons or anything like that. When we come back on the other side, we will continue our topic and get into Beyond Paris, or the larger picture with Paris. So just hang in there with us. Reconnected everything. It looks good. It sounds good. It feels good. Stand by. I'm going to be right back after this. Thanks for your patience. God bless each and every one of you. If you can handle this, if you can put up with this, then, man, you could survive a lot. Let us interrupt us. That's what this was on this 13th day of January 13th, 2015. I apologize, folks, and this is my last apology. Well, Maggie, thank you. This is my last apology. The upgrades to sound, hopefully you can hear the upgrades to the sound issues. And however, my upgrades to the sound did not affect my level of knowledge in terms of connecting and connectivity. This was purely operator error on my part. When I was unceremoniously booted myself, I was addressing Mossad or Israel in 9/11 and Israel as being part of this globalist, allegedly this globalist New World Order takeover. Okay, now I want to address this. An email from Gary. Gary, I'm going to talk to you directly here. I saw your message. No, I was not. I was not actually going to attack you at all. My blood pressure was beginning to skyrocket when I realized that I was about to tank on the communications side of things. I'm doing two people's work here by myself and not doing well. But I do believe that this issue with the Mossad, with Israel, and the theory, the conspiracy angle, the anti-Semitic angle of Mossad and Israel being behind 9/11. Now, I'll tell you one thing, folks. Okay, I'm not gonna do this. I'll just this love revolution in the chat room. We're gonna just say goodbye to you right now. Okay, and I'm not gonna tolerate any type of crap. Okay, I don't know how else to put it from the chat room. I'm not going to put up with anti-Semitic stuff. I'm not going to put up with anti-Israel stuff, because what we're doing here, and this is something that I'll tell you right now, what we're doing here is taking, it would be like me saying, the entirety, all of the American people, everybody in Congress, every police officer, every military person is behind or is involved in conspiracies. It's painting with a broad brush an entire group of people. Okay. Now, and this becomes especially delicate when we talk about Israel. Only because if you look at Israel, once you begin to open this nut, this unravel this ball of yarn about Israel and their being behind events like 9/11 or being involved in events like 9/11, what happens is this group of very vicious, very vile anti-Jew really come out of the woodwork. All right. Now, some people might say, well, geez, you paint the Muslim religion with a very broad brush, Muslims with a very broad brush. Why not be fair and paint the Jews the same way? There's a world of difference. If you look at the foundational documents of the Jewish religion, which is our Old Testament and the Torah and so on. Okay, if you look at those religious texts and compare them to the Quran or compare them to the Holy Bible, folks, there's a world of difference here. Islam, unlike Christianity, unlike Judaism, is not a religion. It really is more of a cult than a religion by definition. And numerous authors have mentioned this. You cannot, in any way, shape, or form, equate Islam and Judaism or Islam and Christianity. They are totally separate. Now, addressing the Mossad or addressing Israel being behind 9/11, okay, we must admit, and I think we're all adults here, we must admit some level of political espionage, political involvement by nation-state actors from Israel, as well as from the United States, that are complicit in numerous terrorist attacks, not just in the United States, but all across the world. Having said that, that does not mean that the entirety of America, the totality of America, is on a path to globalist intent. No. Nor does it mean that Israel is deliberately and purposely behind, the nation-state actors are behind, or as a nation, behind the New World Order. This comes up when you mention the Rothschilds and the Rockefeller, or the Rothschilds in particular, saying, well, they're all Jews. You know, the Jewish people run the banks. The Jewish people run the media. Really? They have Jewish names. Sure, their lineage is Jewish, perhaps, some of them. But are they acting with Jewish intent or intent based on their Jewish beliefs, as are the Muslims, for example? No. Are they acting on, are they fueled by their religious beliefs? No. Are the Muslims? Yes. So there's a difference here. The reason we don't focus specifically, and I've talked to Steve Quayle about this a lot, and I'm going to just be blunt with him, because I asked Steve. I said, hey, Steve, you know, what is with this issue of the 9/11 conspiracy theories? Now, I say conspiracy theories only to lump those together. Why is it that when we talk about 9/11, for example, there is this automatic group of people who come out and denounce Israel and the Jews specifically? Well, he said, look, think of it, and this I'm paraphrasing, of course. He said, think of it this way. You know, you look at America, you look at the CIA, and you look at the various people within the CIA who are complicit in, for example, creating ISIS and funding ISIS, and facilitating the attacks by ISIS and by other various terrorist organizations. So, does that mean that every CIA officer, agent, asset is on that same path? No, it doesn't mean that. And it becomes much more difficult to separate the people who hate the Jews and blame the Jews for everything in these types of conversations than it does. Essentially we would spend more time defending the Jews as opposed to identifying the complicit nation-state actors of Israel, complicit in the attacks, and it gets out of control very quickly because there's an infiltration of people coming in, infiltration of trolls that come in, infiltration of callers that come in, and quickly denounce all of Israel, all of the Jews. Now you might think, again, will you say that about Muslims? Well, no, folks. We're talking about two different things: the religion, the Jewish religion, Judaism, versus Islam. They're two separate things. You cannot talk in the same fashion about these. You cannot talk. It's just impossible to compare the two. It'd be like comparing the old saying, apples and oranges. So, but what happens is the byproduct of this conversation will invariably cause a lot of people to come in and to dump on the Jewish people, which is not what we want to do, which is not fair. It's not fair. It's not accurate. Any more accurate as it would be for me to say everyone in our federal government's a pedophile, for example. We were talking about pedophilia earlier on. No, it's just not accurate. It's not fair. Opening that door creates this anti-Semitic canard that will just linger through the show, thread itself through the show, and the only thing I'd be doing would be, just trying to defend it, something that really would take up too much time. So, Gary, to answer your question, yes, we realize the role of elements within the Mossad being complicit in terrorist attacks. Do you think there's any difference between the elements of the Mossad versus the elements of the CIA versus the elements of the NSA? I don't think there's any difference. No, I don't think so. But again, yeah, let's just say, again, we're all adults here, let's just say that you've got elements within the Mossad, elements within the CIA, elements within our government, elements within the Israeli government that are operating toward the same objectives. The problem Again, the problem is when you talk about Israel, you're talking about a nation set up. You're talking about a religious system, a religion, and pretty soon you've got everybody in the world coming out and just ripping down, taking it as we're beating up on Israel. It's not the same. So that's why, do I avoid the topic? No, not necessarily. Sure, elements of Mossad are involved. Sure, elements of the CIA. Sure, elements of the NSA are involved in the current New World Order agenda. But so are elements of the royal family. Does that make me want... I mean, again, understand where I'm coming from. Look at the Old Testament in the Bible. What does that tell you about the Jewish people? And see, here if I mention this, and I'm just going to close it out with this. Was not land given to the Jews by God via covenant, through a covenant? Didn't that happen according to the Bible? It's in the Bible, isn't it? The covenant was made with the Jews about the land. Then to say, well, or then to open that discussion up and then to talk about the so-called occupation, and this is where it would go, the occupation, Israeli occupation of the Palestinian land. No. We can do, you know what, we will do, and I'll mark this down, we will do a show on this, an entire show, because a few minutes it will not fix, or it will not really be it really won't, it's not worth it. We'll do an entire show on this. All right? That I promise you. All right, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Since this has been such a screwed up night, let's go to the phones. I'm going to go to the phones. So if you want to talk here, if you want to talk to me tonight, 661-244-9839. I'm going to try to get through as many calls as possible. Let's go to the phone, 661-244-9839. Let's go to 804. Go ahead, 804.
Hi, that's me. It's Maria.
I know
you got me?
I got you, Maria.
Okay.
Thanks for bailing me out here, kiddo.
Okay. I just wanted to tell you something I found out today. It was from reading Tom Horn's book, Blood on the Altar. In my book, Prepare for Persecution, I mentioned, after I talked about the baker, that they were trying to force him, threatened him with prison for not baking a wedding cake for a homosexual wedding, and I went into some detail on that. Then I quickly mentioned in passing that there was a photographer, Christian photographer, and a Christian florist, and the same thing. Well, my article on the photographer was from the New York Times, and they didn't tell you the scoop at all. That case went all the way up to the New Mexico Supreme Court, which they didn't mention. And one of the judges there said that these guys are, quote, compelled by law to compromise the very religious beliefs that inspire their lives. And their attorney said, if a lane photographer does not have her rights of conscience protected, then basically nobody does. And he also said Americans are now on notice that the price of doing business is their freedom.
Mm.
So,
well, you sent me, and earlier today you sent me an article, State Compares Christian Baker to Nazis. This was believer forced to celebrate homosexual unions. And folks, this is important. Colorado, there's Civil Rights Commission ordered to a baker to use his artistry to celebrate homosexual unions in violation of his Christian belief is under challenge in part, and I quote, because the commission's impartiality is in serious question, said a brief filed by a legal team with the Alliance Defending Freedom on behalf of Jack Phillips of Masterpiece Cake Shop. Now, what struck me from this, Maria, is where you wrote here, or where Bob Unruh wrote, the commission member. There was a commission that was Phillips appealed the commission's decision to uphold a administrative law judge ruling against him. Now, bottom line is this: the commission member Diane Rice said, "I would like to reiterate that what we said in the hearing or in the last meeting, where I said freedom of religion and religion has been used to justify all kinds of discrimination throughout history, whether it be slavery, whether it be the Holocaust, whether it be, we can list hundreds of situations where freedom of religion has been used to justify discrimination, and to me, it is one of the most despicable pieces of rhetoric that people can use to use their religion to hurt others." And she compared it to Nazism, and she screwed up the free exercise clause as well as the other part of the First Amendment. So there you have it. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. So the persecution is ramping up with these activist judges. I mean, it's we've got to get that steel backbone that Steve Quayle keeps talking about.
We've
got to work on that full time. We've got to do it right now. We can't wait.
No, I totally agree with you. Yep, I totally agree with you. Maria, let me ask you a question here, because we were touching on this before, and can you comment on this? I mean, folks, our caller is Maria Canise, the Prepare for Persecution. Okay, it's on the bottom portion of our website. Click on the link, buy her book. It's a great book. Can you comment on somebody wanted me to talk about the Mossad angle to the complicity, the attacks, Israel's position in the attacks, and complicity in terrorism, that is. Can you comment on that? Because I know you and I have had discussions about this.
Well, when you look in the Bible, there were always Jews who were faithful to God, and then there were some that went running after the pagan gods. So it's always been a mixture. It is everywhere, but I think there you think of, oh my goodness, who's that guy he's the mayor of Chicago now, is Rahm Emanuel. He was born in Israel. He's a Jew. He's the most anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, blasphemous, vicious guy I can think of. He does not represent Israel or the Jews at all, period. No way.
Okay.
And Hitler claimed to be a Christian, and he was not. He was an occultist. So we can't, just because someone happened to be born in Israel and have a Jewish name, that doesn't mean there are anti-Semitic Jews.
Very much.
That's one way of trying to avoid persecution themselves, distance themselves,
Yeah, and I've been accused, not by Gary, but by others of late. Well, you just don't talk, for example. You don't talk about Israel or the Jewish role in various terrorist attacks, and it's you're covering for them. And again, Gary, I'm not talking to you, or not talking about you, but other emails I've gotten. Why are you not talking about this? Well, and this is the kind of email I've been getting up late, and it seems this whole thing, and you and I spoke about this. This is ramping up to extreme. I mean, I'm going to expose guilty parties regardless of color or stripe. I'm going to expose the guilty parties, but they're really going after the Jewish.
I got a question for you. How come a guy in a newspaper gets killed, and 50 big shots from all over the world go over there, and they have a great big demonstration and all this stuff, and then somebody goes to a kosher market in Paris and slaughters 4 people, and everybody ignores it?
That's a great question, and I
how come they ignored all the terrorist attacks on Israel? You get one little thing in France, it's a big hairy deal. Israel goes through that much every day.
Exactly. You're exactly correct. No one hears about that. Or I shouldn't say no one hears about it.
They don't care. They shrug their shoulders.
Right.
So there's a double standard here. There's something...
Yes.
Well, we need to remind people, every time the Jews get persecuted, the real Bible-believing Christians also get persecuted. It happened in communist Russia, happened under Mussolini, happened in Nazi Germany. There were a lot of good Bible-believing Christians in those concentration camps. So we are both the apple of God's eye, and the devil hates both the real Christians and the real Jews. And so the people that are out to persecute are going to get both groups. So we need to care about them just like we care about if they're persecuting Christians, because otherwise we're going to wind up the same. What was it, Niemöller, that said they came for this group, but I didn't speak up, and they came for that group, and I didn't speak up, and then they came for me? And
there was no one left to speak up. That's right.
Right.
Exactly.
So it goes. They go together. I mean, we're God's people. We worship the same God. We're the only ones who worship the true God.
Let's be clear on that, Maria. You're talking about the Jewish people, Jews and Christians worship the same God, right? Not Muslims,
right.
Not Buddhists, not.
No,
okay, right.
no. According to the Bible, pagan gods are demons. Paul said you can't take the cup of God and the cup of demons at the same time. He called them demons. Actually, I'd say Allah may be more than just a demon. I think that's another name for Satan.
That's the more I get into the intricate nature of the Quran and Islam and all of that, I have to say it certainly looks that way. And
the Hindus and the Buddhists and all that have martyred Christian missionaries and stuff, but they're not inherently vicious. The holy books don't tell them to be vicious the way the Quran does. There are some good, decent, loving Muslims out there, but they don't dare speak up or they'll get killed, you know?
Exactly. Okay.
They don't dare protest.
No, and that's, can you even be called a moderate if you stand by and watch mass executions, genocide, murder take place? I mean, I don't get that. You're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And
then you're like all the ones in Nazi Germany, all the Lutherans and Catholics and others who are in their church services, hearing the trains go by with the Jews in them. I mean, some people can just freeze because they're incapable of dealing with it. It's too big for them to handle. In that case, I don't really say that they're complicit. I say that they're just too immature. They're not strong enough. They can't handle it. They're like children. They freeze.
I can see that, but does that fully exonerate their inactivity? I mean, boy, now we're getting into specific
yeah.
events.
I know, and we're going to have to face the same kind of problems ourselves, and a lot of us are going to freeze. We can't stay on the fence. The fence belongs to the devil. I love what John from Pasadena said on that.
That's right, exactly, and I totally agree with that. Okay, well, and thank you for your insight into that question, because again,
we have to take a stand for righteousness. We have to, no matter what it costs, but it can take time. And a person could freeze for even months before they're finally able to work their way through and take a stand on it. And it could be a process because it's so overwhelming. It would be like you're suddenly faced with a man-eating tiger. Here you think everything's normal, and all at once there's this tiger in front of you. What do?
That's
it's just overwhelming. True. The whole system overloads and shuts down.
Okay.
And that's one thing they're counting on.
Well, yeah, I agree, and I think that we're going to be seeing, as you said, we're going to be seeing more and more of that in the coming days. And
we should be praying for the baker and the florist and the others, the photographers and the ones that are taking a stand, because they're on the tip of the spear, and they're paying a price. And by the way, with the florist, the photographer, a court has now said that in addition to suing the business, they can sue the individual. So they're not only going to bankrupt her business, put her out of business, they're going to bankrupt her personally, her and her husband.
And that's what we're facing now. That's absolutely correct.
So they're just getting as vicious as they can, and if they get away with that, then they'll go further. And next thing you know, it'll be prison, and then it'll be the camps. So
how's that suit you, folks? I mean, and you're not subject to hyperbole when you know I know you have a life of study and you've studied history, so that's not hyperbole, that's not fear talk,
No.
that's reality. That's reality.
No, it's not. Listen, the difference between paranoia and being realistic is not the degree of fear or how bad the picture is. Is it based on reality or not? For a Jew in New York City in 1980 to be terrified of being sent to a camp is paranoia. For a Jew in Germany in 1943, that was extremely realistic. So right now, that kind of fear is realistic. 20 years ago, it would have been paranoia.
Very interesting.
Even 10
analogy.
years ago, it would have been paranoia. But right now, the way things are changing, it's become realistic.
The U.S. Supreme Court has never found, for example, the issues you talked about, the baker, the photographer. Our Supreme Court has never found that sexual orientation is a status equivalent to, we'll say, race, for example. So, but what's happening is these activist judges are now making it a case that making it equivalent to race, for example. And so now, the First Amendment just forbids religious bias. Well, this according to the together with the Commission's demonstrated misstatements of constitutional law, this raises serious questions about their intent, I believe. Not just their judgment, but their intent. And I think it's their intent to take anybody that's against the redefinition of marriage, the redefinition of anything moral out of the picture. And yes, ultimately into subjugation.
These are corrupt judges. They're crooked, and the Bible is full of God warning people not to be corrupt judges and how bad it is when you have them. And we're seeing that right now. Right,
exactly. What's the next step? I mean, what do you see in the immediate future here then?
What do I see in the immediate future? One thing is they keep calling us fundamentalists, and then they call people like ISIS fundamentalists. So in the mind of the people, they're trying to demonize us and associate us, Bible-believing Christians, with people like ISIS. And the Jews in Germany can tell you what that leads to.
Wow. Certainly not too promising. All right.
They're trying to demonize us, marginalize us, whatever, and that's part of getting your dictatorship going. It's part of your one world government. You got to have a common enemy to fight, right?
Yeah, and of course the words that are used, the definitions that are used, the equivalency that they're trying to make between ISIS and anybody that is anti-abortion or anti-homosexuality or pro-Second Amendment, they're on the same.
Right.
I mean, using the same descriptions. This is how
exactly.
It's going.
And a lot of them are Bible-believing Christians, so it overlaps a lot. It's not exactly the same group, but a lot of them are.
Man, I'll tell you. Okay. And things are, and I just want to reiterate the fact that, I like your analogy of fear, the unrational fear of 1980, versus today. I think that the circumstances and times have changed time has changed the circumstances, and circumstances have been changed now. So it is a rational fear, we'll say, to face persecution, as you point out in your book. And folks, this is not anything. I mean, this is not a shameless plug for Prepare for Persecution. This is a very important discussion. And Maria does talk about this in her book, Prepare for Persecution. If you go to hagmanhagmann.com, scroll all the way down. You got to get that book. I've got it right here on my desk, Maria, and I'll tell you, it's a fantastic read. Closing thoughts. Thanks for bailing me out.
Yeah. You know what? I recently read the second half of that book myself because I needed encouragement. So God didn't just show me that stuff for other people. He showed it to me for myself. It's something I need to keep working with. I mean, I know it in my head. There are times I feel it in my heart, and then there are times when I get scared and I don't feel it, and I need to be reminded. It's the first part of it's information. you've got lots of guests that have wonderful information in their books. For instance, I just mentioned Tom Horn's book on Blood on the Altar. But the second half of it is something you work with to build yourself up, to make yourself strong spiritually and emotionally, and be prepared ahead of time so that when the storm hits, we can stand. And so that when the evil day comes, we can stand. In Ephesians, when he talks about the evil day, we're all going to have to face an evil day, and this one's going to be pretty big. So it takes time and preparation and working with it and getting those scriptures in you. And for myself, just reading the scriptures that I had there was helping me. So, you mentioned
blood on. You mentioned blood on the altar. How does the information on blood on the altar comport with what's taking place today? I think I might have interrupted a thought you were going to express.
No, it's fine. Some of it was new to me. Some of it was confirming things I've already been finding, and some of it, a little bit, was over my head when they get into the really scientific and technical stuff. But he's got a number of authors contributing to it. But it's a valuable book.
Anything you took away from that would be applicable to, we'll say, what we're seeing today with the Pope, with the Paris, with what's going on in Paris with world leaders, or what happened in Paris with world leaders, with the current events with the Pope, with Vatican, with Christianity in general?
They go into the Vatican somewhat, a fair amount, and of course this Pope being the false prophet and the last Pope and so on. They go into that a good bit. But they also go into the homosexual agenda and how that's a major attack on Christians, serious Christians, real Christians, and how also a major attack on the real Christians is going to come from the ones that are Christians in name only. You know, the mega churches feel good, everything's warm and fuzzy. There's another thing too. Yeah, there's another thing too, and that's that somebody is now saying it's one of the big evangelical pastors, and I don't know his name because the person who told me about it didn't give me the name, but he's big enough that other pastors go to him, and he gives conferences for pastors and stuff. He has said that to call somebody a sinner is abusive. It's abuse. Well, what does the word salvation mean if you don't understand that you're a sinner? How can you present the gospel of salvation if you can't tell people about sin? And calling it abuse is only a small step away from calling it hate speech. So you can see they're moving in the direction of wanting to make it illegal to share the gospel in any meaningful way. Exactly. Well, it's already illegal in the military. There's a military chaplain. He was at a workshop for suicide prevention. And he's a chaplain, and he's sharing how he was so depressed and things in Scripture that helped him overcome the depression. And because of that, he was officially rebuked because he was treating the Bible as if it meant something, and he was treating his faith as if it meant something, and it meant more than all the other religions, you know. He was officially reprimanded for that. Here he is trying to save the lives of other soldiers who might kill themselves, and sharing his heart, pouring his heart out, being very transparent, and he gets officially rebuked for that. Threat of discipline, you know.
That's incredible.
What kind of state is that when we're doing that to the guys, the men and women whose lives are on the line?
So, ultimately what we're seeing take place right now is more of it's almost a covert, I don't know if you can hear that static, I apologize. It's almost a covert, shall we say, not an in-your-face attack against Christians, but something under the surface that's really going to have an undertow that's going to pull us under, ultimately.
It's that, but I also think it's a many-faceted thing that they're going to come at us from a lot of different angles. But the homosexual thing is going to be a huge one. You know, all they have to do is go to a pastor and tell him to marry him, and he refuses, and what's he going to do? They lose their tax exemption. Next step, maybe is threatened with prison or something.
Well, as you so aptly pointed out with the photographer and the baker now and other, I mean, you could go after them personally, bankrupt them, and it's really not that big of a step from the civil actions to the potential criminal actions. I mean, we've seen it the reverse. We've seen the criminal go into the civil, from negligent homicide to a wrongful death suit. We've seen that. So the flip side of that would not be too difficult to. They could criminalize attacks on homosexuals, or they can criminalize that as hate speech, and then we're done.
Now, what we have to do is be willing to follow Jesus no matter what it costs, literally put our lives on the line, because we've got to keep the picture of eternity in view. We've got to keep the big picture in mind, and that's eternity, heaven and hell. No matter what they do to us here, the worst thing they could do to us here is a whole lot easier than 5 minutes in hell. And the best thing that we could have in our life here is nothing compared to 5 minutes in heaven. So we've got to keep the big picture.
How do we best do that, Marianne? I mean, obviously that's a huge question and equally huge answer, but I mean, baby steps. How do we actually fight that fight and still stay viable?
Prayer, scripture, worship. And also it helps to memorize scriptures that are helpful. It's like, having bullets for your gun, certain scriptures.
Right.
When the doubts and the fears come, you just whip it out with those scriptures and run them through your head. I have certain things. One of them is that God is righteous and true, and all His judgments are just.
Okay. But how would that serve me? I mean, I understand that, but how would that serve me as a talk show host at this point if I said, if the government ruled that any type of anti-homosexual discussion is unlawful, they would criminalize that? Because I'm not going to conform to anything like that. So I'm going to speak my mind about issues, whether it be homosexuality, abortion, pro-Second Amendment. So if I'm faced with criminal penalties, what do I do? Because I'm going to keep spotting off.
You keep spotting off, and eventually you pay the price. And I'm going to pay a price for writing that book. I'm doing everything I can to get it out, because I believe for some people it's going to make the difference between heaven and hell. It's going to make the difference between standing and caving in. But I know that the more it gets out there, the more danger I'm in, So it's a, but I had to make that decision when I published it. Whatever it costs, I've got to get this out there. God gave it to me to help people, and I can't sit on it out of fear, so I've got to get it out. Period.
Go ahead. Sorry.
That's it. And Jesus said that we're blessed when we're persecuted. Now, it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't look like it, but we've got to take Him at His word. And what I do is I say, well, you said you're blessed when we're persecuted. You're blessed when people say all manner of evil against you. You've run into some of that. Well, it doesn't feel like a blessing, but if He says it, okay, Lord, help me see it the way You see it. That's the way I pray on that kind of thing. And that's with everything that comes out. Lord, give me Your perspective. Help me see this the way You see it. And also, you look at like Matthew 24, Jesus said these things are going to happen. The Bible says they're going to happen. The scriptures must be fulfilled. Jesus said, how else could the scriptures be fulfilled if He didn't go to the cross? So He's willing to go to the cross because that's the way it has to be. So He's our head, we're the body, we have to be willing to follow Him there. He said we have to take up our cross daily and follow Him. That's part of it. As Americans, they don't preach that in most churches, and we're not used to thinking in those terms. But we have to. We got to grow up and be like the Christians were 20, 30, 40 years ago. Right now, they're so wimpy. And I'm weak too. The stuff that I learned in there was because I was weak and I was desperate, and God showed me because I needed it. It's a result of years of struggle. years of struggle and prayer. It's not just intellectual, the second part of that book.
And folks, I do highly recommend Maria's book, Prepare for Persecution. I'm going to tell you right now, there's so much information in the book. I didn't mean for this to take the turn as it did tonight. Of course, with the technical difficulties, self-inflicted, I might add. The book, however, Prepare for Persecution, Perilous Times and Biblical Comfort, is really an instruction manual. Like I said, I've got it right here. And it's an important read. It's required reading, as I note. So just click on that link. It's invaluable information. But we're part of the remnant. The remnant's going to have to fight, are we not? We're going to have to become felons, aren't we?
Well, yeah.
Because
if it's against the law to tell the truth, if it's against the law to be a Christian, remember that old thing of if it was a crime to be a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? We're going to have to live that one out.
Exactly. All right. Well,
and we don't want to be like
ready.
the church, like the church was in Nazi Germany, where they had swastikas on their altar.
No, that's right.
We can't do that. You had the small group, the Confessing Church, with Dietrich Bonhoeffer and a few other courageous people who were badly persecuted, but most of the church caved in out of fear. We cannot do that. The stakes are too high. It's heaven and hell. We can't afford it. And it's not just for us. If we cave in and the people around us see our example, that encourages them to cave in. We've got to stand up and be an example to them to help them have the backbone. It's not just us. If we go down, we can pull others down with us. We can't do that to the people we love. We do it if we can't do it for our own sake, we can do it for their sake. If we can't do it out of love for God, then do it out of the fear of the Lord, because He's our judge. And He said, if you deny me before men, I'll deny you before my Father in heaven. If you acknowledge me before men, I'll acknowledge you before my Father in heaven. Boy, that's a scripture that I think about a lot these days. We've got to stand on that one and have it get real to us. And we can ask God to make it more real to us. We can ask God to show us what scriptures will minister to us personally and make them more real to us and get them inside us and open them up to us. Open us up to them, open them up to us. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I do know what you mean.
It's a process.
It is a process, but it's a process with, I believe, an end. Obviously, we know how. Look, I think we know. We should know. We're already fighting from a position of victory. That's number one. Number two, we know how this worldly story ends. It's what happens between the beginning and that final day, that final breath, that really is going to make the difference in how we handle things.
Well, God's grace is sufficient, and His strength is made perfect in weakness. And boy, that's one I come back to a lot. And another one is in Revelation, in two places, it says that God's going to wipe away all our tears. And that means so much to me. That's one of my favorite passages.
Right.
He's going to wipe away all our tears.
Well, yes. But I think, too, just to bring this home, though, those tears, the origins of those tears are going to be the torment and the torture that we as Christians, we as pro-Second Amendment, anti-abortion, anti-immorality, the origin of those tears are going to be brought on by earthly enemies, are they not?
Yes,
demonic.
They will. And they're also going to be brought on when we see people that we love fall away from the Lord and cave in. That's going to be heartbreaking. Yeah, and it's not just them out there. Some of these are people we love dearly.
Right.
So, but Paul said that I might know Him in the power of His resurrection, the fellowship of His sufferings. When it breaks our heart to see those things, we're sharing in the fellowship of Christ's sufferings. And when we offer them truth and they refuse it, that's something God goes through all the time. We're sharing in the fellowship of Christ's sufferings. And when you speak truth and that people need, and people tear you up because of it and say terrible things about you because of it, you're sharing in the fellowship of Christ's sufferings. He spoke the truth. He healed people. He healed lepers, he healed the sick, he cast out demons, he showed tremendous love and compassion to people that were outcasts in society. And because of that, there were other people who said terrible things about him and wanted to kill him because of it, and eventually they did. So we're sharing in the fellowship of Christ's sufferings. And when you do that,
that's what Stephen,
you get more understanding of how much he loves us and the price he paid for us. But it's more than that. There's a kind of fellowship that you can only get by being in the trenches with another soldier, you know, by going through the same things together. And when we go through these things, then we're in the trenches with Jesus, and so there's a kind of bond that develops that you can't get any other way. And we're going to have that for all eternity. I mean, he can give us salvation, but there's an element in that relationship that has to be developed. He loved all of the 12. Judas betrayed him. Out of the other 11, there were 3 that were special, Peter, James, and John, and of that, John particularly close to him. Now, that same love that he had with John, that same relationship was available to all 12 of them, including Judas. But their response, how they responded to it, is what determined how close they got to him. So we need to respond in a way that gets us closer to him. That's part of what we'll enjoy for all eternity.
And that's the promise, and that, of course, is what we seek to is what we seek. I mean, obviously, our reward is not this side of heaven; it's in heaven. So, I understand that. But you know, Maria, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but I think people have a tendency to think that they can go through life, especially now, and not have that persecution against them, you know, and not realize how severe the battle will be, how the battle is waging right now in the court systems and elsewhere, and how it's going to become very personal to everybody, every true Christian.
Well, we've had a long time in America when Christians were respected and treated well, but when you look at history and when you look all over the world, that's extremely rare. And now that's coming to an end. So we had a precious time, and I think a lot of it is because people got their faith undermined. They got preoccupied with worldly things. They started taking God for granted. They got apathetic, you know, and some Christians didn't, but on the whole, most of them did. Right. But also there's a reason the Rockefellers pumped millions of dollars into seminaries. They put liberal professors in there to undermine the faith and morals of the men who went there to study to become pastors.
Right.
They knew where the strength of the nation comes from. They knew if they could undermine the church by undermining the pastors, that then America would be much weaker and easier to take over.
You know, let me tell you something about that. I was surprised. I did some research. The minor seminary I went to actually was a large donor, and I had to go back nearly 40 years. A large donor was was owned by, under the control of, and owned partially by the Rockefellers, and I had no clue. I mean, so when you're talking about millions of dollars in 1970s dollars, you're talking about a huge influence within the
Started
seminary.
back around 1920 or 30, they even used CIA to infiltrate seminaries. That was in the Blood on the Altar.
Yes, yeah, and I do have that book.
One of the Dulles brothers was involved in that.
That's absolutely correct. And a book about the Dulles brothers, folks, the old boys, written by Burton Hirsch, fantastic. It's not an easy read; it's a very difficult read, but it gets into that as well in quite the detail, and their involvement in all sorts of covert activities back in the early 20th century. So,
by the way, the Dulleses were involved in the rat lines of getting the Nazi war criminals over to America and then down to Latin America, and they hid them out in convents. That's a smart thing to do, and part of the thing they did. But the Dulles brothers were involved in that. I remember reading that from other research.
I got to tell you, the unveiling of the Dulles brothers, the influence there, and even the influence that they have exerted to the present day by policy that remains. I tell you, we could do an hour on that alone. It's just incredible to see this progression, as you talked about. Well, as Blood and the Altar talks about in other books, and the progression over the years, and now I do believe that we're at the point, and I think 2015, 2016 is going to be the point where the plug is going to be pulled, and we're going to be at the full-out war as Christians, and even as Americans. But as Christians in particular, as Jews in particular, I believe that. I believe that this is going to be the year, or next year will be the year. Within the next 18 months.
It's happening fast. It's happening with breathtaking speed. And by the way, on that cover of The Economist, they've got Alice in Wonderland on there. And in Alice, you have sudden drastic changes that don't make sense. All at once, wham, things are totally different. And also, the guy that wrote that is an occultist, and he's Aleister Crowley required all his magicians to read Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, so that shows how occult it is. But also, people suspected him of being a pedophile. Now, whether he actually was or not is beside the point, but that fits right again into that pedophile theme again that you had with the Pied Piper and the little boy in there.
Exactly, and people. The reason I brought that up, and thanks for reminding me, it's been such a disjointed program. I apologize for that. But having said that, the reason I brought that up, that Pied Piper, it does have the pedophilia suggestive aspects if you dig deep enough into what The Economist, or if you dig like you just said. So don't take it at face, folks. I mean, dig deep, because there are. I'm telling you.
He lures the children away and they disappear forever. They're gone.
Yeah.
And where do they go? What happens to them?
Exactly. Well, thank you for bringing that up. And Marie, we're at the close of our program. I can't believe that this abbreviated, interrupted program is at the close. But I got to tell you, thanks for bailing me out. I appreciate it. You helped me out.
God bless you, and don't be discouraged by those sound problems and stuff, Doug. It could happen to anybody, okay? We love you, and the people here understand, okay?
God bless you. Thank you.
God bless you, dear. Bye-bye.
All right. Good night. Folks, thanks for putting up with me tonight. Thanks for putting up with the program fraught with self-inflicted wounds. That was me. No one pulled the plug except from me. I did that. And I apologize to Mr. Stan Deyo for not being able to channel him in on the proper channel. But tomorrow, coming back stronger than ever. We've got, as I said, our audio problem fixed. The audio problem's fixed, and we will, in fact, have a full, uninterrupted program tomorrow. Thank you for your patience. God bless you. Thank you so much for your emails. Thank you so much for your support. I love you. And, you're never alone. You're not going to walk this fight alone. You're not going to walk by yourself. We are going to be by your side. With that, put this tonight's episode out of its misery. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. God bless. Until tomorrow, stay safe.